everyone, this is Nancy Murad, and I'll be your host for the first season of MetLife Health Talk Show. Tina, I'm gonna start with you. So you have two boys, and
That's right.
you have been working from home for some time now. Tell us a little bit about how did you deal with telling your boys what is the corona? What is this whole thing that changed their life overnight?
Thanks, Nancy. So actually, I'm just going to go back to 1.5 months when my two sons came back from school, and they were like, "Guess what? We have 4 weeks of holidays." And I was like, "Wow, that's great." But it's not exactly like a holiday, right? So they said, "Actually, boys, the situation is a little bit serious. So let me just explain to you." And I have a very open relationship with my sons, in the sense I try to tell them the truth, of course, about things as they are.
How old are your kids?
I have two boys. One is 5 and one is 8. So they're two naughty boys.
Of course, we have two girls now. We will hear that also from Hatem. So how do you think that while you took these measures to educate them, and I'm sure they're seeing a lot of stories in the TV when they talk to their friends. How do you think they might be anxious beyond a stage that you are aware about?
Absolutely. So the thing is that especially my younger one is a kind of got a little bit, concerned about these things. It's, to be honest with you, we don't show them much of TV news, and they're not up to the mark to actually read the articles. But we can't help talking amongst ourselves as the adults at home. Oh my, there are X number of cases and somebody passed away, maybe with the coronavirus, and we don't realize that, they're actually around. So my younger son was a little bit anxious. He's like, okay, so am I going to, is it possible that we can die because of this virus? So that was a very difficult question that came to me. And instead of basically looking at the more of a reactive approach, I took the more proactive approach as to how you can actually, not have any issues with this virus, if that's the reason why we're all staying at home. So I kind of calmed him down a bit. And sometimes I also told him that some people may get very sick if they are already sick. So that's the reason why we need to eat better. We need to, wash our hands and stay safe. So that actually helped him calm his mind down to the new normal.
I guess so. The new maybe normal until further notice, as I like to call it, or the new temporary normal. Sarah, I like to believe that there isn't necessarily a one size fits all to any approach to anything. But I'm sure from if you want a best practice or a scientific perspective, there must be out there some best practices that the parent, the mom or the dad can follow to speak to their child with, if you want, the balance of informing them but without scaring them. So what's your view on that?
Yes, actually, that's a question that a lot of people have been asking me lately. And obviously, there isn't really one answer that will fit everybody. Everybody has their own parenting style, and some people are more authoritarian, others are more authoritative, others include their children and call upon their support more. I would just like to warn people from, kind of treating their children as if they're older than they are. Some kids are very intelligent and sophisticated in the way that they speak. They give you an impression that they are, they can negotiate and go back and forth with you. And parents sometimes fall in the trap of treating them like adults. But the problem is that psychologically, they do not have the capacity to handle that amount of tension. So I'm very cautious about what I tell kids and what I like people to tell kids, because it can be overwhelming to them. I've seen a lot of situations where the kids are, regressing and just being really, scared. So I would just limit the information as much as possible, have no discussions at all in front of them about cases and any of that. Just the basic information, why we're staying home, how we are protecting ourselves, what is being done. So definitely reassuring them a lot about what everyone in the world is doing to solve this problem while we patiently wait. the researchers, all the doctors, what they're doing, the government, and so all of that. So that it's always should be a containing approach and a very reassuring approach when it comes to the kids.
That's amazing.
Very young ones.
That's actually, we tend to sometimes. I have a nephew. I have two young cousins, and to your point, they are smart. They speak to you to a point where you forget that they're actually not adults. So Hatem, tell us a little bit about your daughters. Do you feel you've had the same dynamic at home? I know you are already a working from home dad. So how did that work for you?
Yeah, us, Tamara, Hannah, and I, we've had this set up, not so much on the academia side, but how the house is set up. I've been working from home for 7 years. So we haven't really missed a beat in terms of what our routine is day to day, their chores. We have animals that they've got to take care of. We've got fruits and vegetables that they've got to pick. We've got a very analog life outside of the house up until the summer rolls around. So for them, the change has been they haven't been able to see their friends. We haven't been able to do the things that we do usually that are non-home related. So the desert, the beach, cousins, their aunts and uncles, all of these things. But within the house, it's just been regular life, and we're very blessed, and we feel very grateful for that.
You mentioned the whole working from home and inside the walls and outside the walls. We want to jump a little bit to talking about the e-learning. I know you have very strong views on the future of work and maybe the future of education. How has been your experience with them?
So, like Sada said earlier, I'm probably guilty of talking to the girls older than they are. What do you have today? Yeah, I've got algebra, I've got long division, I've got social studies. Okay, yalla, faddalu, go ahead and do it. Okay, but Poppy, we have a question. Okay, I forgot how to do long division. We're not going to have that conversation now. But we've been on the academia side. They've been self-starting. They've been taking care of themselves. Obviously, there's some tech stuff that we've got to manage. But they see their classmates every day. They're on Zoom calls exactly like we are. So I think for them, when they look back at this, the subject matter isn't going to matter. And what they did, they're not going to remember, their multiplication tables. For Hannah, she's doing all of the things that she would be doing face-to-face, but she's going to remember that she studied with her friend in her bed, and they did these revisions together. And I think that sense of belonging that school instills in people, and this is obviously my personal opinion, is going to be digital for them instead of in person. And I don't know what that's going to be like, 15 years from now, 10 years from now, but the analog sense of belonging has been replaced with a digital sense of belonging, and I'm still glad they've got it, obviously, because it's important.
I like your positive way of seeing things. I like that you connected the kids' mindset with connecting to the other, irrespective of the medium, maybe. How do you feel that in a future where, I know we have a second episode about the future of work, but maybe from a kid's perspective and e-learning, if this became more mainstream, what could be the challenge of a kid connecting socially? Like, do we worry about them having a social connectivity concern? How would they still, today they go to school, they meet people, they are social. So
for me, I love that they don't have to go to bed at a certain time, to be up at, the crack of dawn at 6 o'clock in the morning, to be breakfast at a certain time, to get to school. We're still getting the school day done. We're still getting our work day done without the stress, I would say. I like this, actually. I like this a lot.
Yeah, so the whole idea of what kind of positive takeaways we take from that experience and bring it to the future, I think that's going to be the question, irrespective of maybe if we mimic it 100% or not. Tell me a little bit. I know you may have had some challenges or not. I don't know. We spoke a little bit earlier about that. I do feel from a lot of the parents that I know from the community that in the beginning, the e-learning experience was a bit challenging, and then things might have evolved to adapt. So how was the progression of that for you, and also from your kids' perspective?
Nancy, I just wanted to second Heatham on the routine. That's something that we actually have in our home as well. So we have a pretty strict routine in the sense that when we wake up and so on, and when we actually go to school and our studies and their meals. And from the e-learning point of view, to be very honest with you, when the first day this actually started, we did not actually have a plan in mind. And I thought that we need to complete everything before the end of that particular day, and I was still stuck to that particular routine that we actually had. So the first 2 days I found it really overwhelming and kind of a little bit difficult. And at least in our school there was kind of a lot of e-learnings that were coming together. The one thing great with our school is that we had a very open discussion with the teachers, and we realized that they managed to actually have fewer activities for them to do it. So in the beginning it was tough, but right now I think we've moved on to a routine. We've changed the routine compared to what it was. It took us maybe 1 or 2 3 days to do that. But once we actually set through, it's actually playing out really well. And very honestly, us as human beings, compared to everybody in the home, I think my 2 sons have adjusted the best. They're so feisty and ready to adapt. And I think adaptability amongst all of us is one of the greatest things. So I'm pretty much happy, and they are very happy as well. They also use Zoom to speak to their teachers as well as their friends in school. So I think they are socializing pretty well as well.
This whole point of pivoting and adapting in our nature is probably what keeps us going, and what keeps me personally, and I hope a lot of people, positive about what's to come. So e-learning, working from home, moving offices, cooking maybe more, I don't know, a lot of it happening in your world, and the world of a lot of parents. Sarah, how can they take care of themselves? I mean, they are running households, and a lot of people in that household are relying on the parents, whether themselves to start with, or the kids, or sometimes the helper. What are some things that they can do within the time they have to kind of have this me time?
Yeah, so that's amazing, because that's actually where my mind was going. I feel like, here today we have a few examples of parents who have it together, which isn't the case for most parents. Yeah. So you guys, I think it's really great. You have some good sense of, what you're doing, and you have some basics in place, like a good routine, and, the kids are doing their homework and they're socializing. So that's good. A lot of other parents are struggling much more in this situation. I think the point about self-care is really essential, because we have layers. The way I see it, we have layers: social layer, where we share certain level of our difficulties. We really have different deeper layers that even we are not even aware of the level of how anxious we could be or not be. And those levels, usually we keep them very private, sometimes even outside of our own awareness. Okay, so how do we heal all those layers, regardless of if we are able to bring them to awareness or express them to others or not? One of the most amazing ways, Nancy, that I think we have the absolutely unique opportunity now to start to practice ourselves and with our family is meditation. Specific types of meditation are very effective in their ability to bring our attention to our own deeper needs and self and states, as in states and like how are we doing, but to cognize that on a finer level, because we have a lot of filters and a lot of psychological defense mechanisms that keep these things outside of our awareness. But funny enough, we cannot keep it outside of influencing our own kids and children, because children feel our energy. They don't hear our thoughts. Yeah. And they definitely don't hear our words. They just feel our energy. So when we see them acting out, many times, if we have trouble with that, and if we aren't able to discipline them or getting an order in place, it's because us on a deeper level, outside of our awareness, or maybe inside our awareness, we aren't really settled, and children, they just mirror that. So a practice that I personally really love when it comes to self-care, because it's the only thing that actually has a lot of scientific evidence again for it. So a lot of meditation applications are there, and they're good and okay. But when you come from a psychological perspective, I always look at the scientific evidence. And the technique that has most scientific evidence is transcendental meditation. And this technique has over 400 published studies in peer-reviewed journals. So I really love it. If you don't, if you don't have that accessible to you, then an amazing self-care tip would be practicing yoga, because yoga actually brings the body into that order.
So, I mean, we're talking here about the generations of the future, right? And I remember in my times, I grew up in a war zone, and we had to go at the age of 4 through a lot of times where I still remember very vividly in my memory. Do you think this could affect them on the long term? Any thoughts on what the future of how they would look back at this, and what is our responsibility to help them look back at this and say, oh, we had this fun phase, and it went by. And
yes, exactly. So I think the point that you're helping me kind of verbalize more is that we have to be careful the level of stress in the house, how high it gets, because if it gets very high, it can leave an impression on them. We are very cautious because there is something called, post-traumatic stress disorder, and people looking back at certain situations and being very scared about it. So, and these are children, so they don't have the rational capacity to rationalize and settle down. So we just keep things very mellow next to them, near them, and even though we are in one house, doesn't mean we have to be together all the time. So we have to kind of instill this discipline with the children that, sometimes adults need to be there in a space on their own, and they have to go to their space. Create this division and have these boundaries at home, because obviously now we're spending 24/7 with everyone. So it's important to have these boundaries, even with your spouse, even about that.
And I think it beautifully summarizes the idea that kids actually mirror us. So the way we show them the behavior, they will feel it. If we are calm, they will be calm. If they are stressed,
yes,
they will be stressed. So I think it's a very good point to take away from this. Thanks, Sarah.